Here are 5 lore details from Insomniac Spider-Man universe. Let's start with the first one here. Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, is one of Spider-Man's longtime enemies and has been there in some iterations in the early beginning of Spider-Man's career. The Insomniac games is no exception. In fact, Kingpin might be one of the most difficult enemies Peter has faced, as it has been mentioned that Fisk nearly killed Spider-Man before. To start, when you interact with his sword with MJ during this mission here, she had this to say.
Fisk cut Peter open like a pork sausage with this the first time they fought. Pete got away, collapsed in my yard half dead, and I had to steal my dad's car to drive him to the ER. The first of many Nurse MJ moments. Too many.
So, Peter got lucky. Really lucky he survived here. In fact, this kind of ties back to when Miles at the endgame was trying to convince Peter to teach him how to use his powers. Peter pretty much says he got in way too many deadly situations and just kind of got lucky to survive. Check this out.
Training?
Yeah, maybe just the basic stuff, like swinging from a skyscraper. Or swinging from a low building. Or a tree.
Miles, you're 15. You need to focus on school. That's way more important than...
Yeah, but if I finish all my homework early and you've got some free time one day... I mean, you started when you were 15, right?
And I nearly got myself killed at least 100 different times. I can't let that happen to you.
Okay.
Fisk was deadly in his first encounter with Spider-Man, especially when you consider that Peter was still a kid here, you know? Fisk wasn't opposed to killing kids, I guess, even if he didn't know Spider-Man was a child, but yeah, he probably could tell by maybe his voice, but who knows. Still, this tidbit shows how Peter got lucky in his early years as Spider-Man. Moving on, we can find this cello here as well.
What did Fisk call this? Vanessa?
And this cello is actually named after his wife, Vanessa Fisk, who, funny enough, is never mentioned in the game, nor do we ever see her, as far as I know. This is the only reference we kind of get to her. Vanessa is a huge part of Wilson Fisk's life, and in the 8 years Spider-Man has been a thing, with Fisk probably being a thing longer than that, perhaps Vanessa moved on from Fisk. Maybe she died, which I doubt, or she simply is just never mentioned, which is also a possibility. It's a shame because Kingpin is one of Spidey's more interesting enemies to me, and he kind of gets the Two-Face treatment from the Arkham games where he's just underutilized. I think Kingpin could have been so much more. And one more thing we can use from Fisk's lore is his Obliterator cane, which is in the display case here.
Always hated this cane. So tacky.
It's the famous cane Kingpin walks around with that he beats people up with. It's been known to hold a lot of interesting weapons like lasers or sleeping gas, but he uses it to just beat the hell out of people, basically, which is kind of funny. It's in a display case though, so it looks like it's something he stopped using. Kind of like the cello, which was related to Vanessa. Perhaps the things here is just stuff he moved on from. Again, I kind of wish we learned more about Kingpin because there's a very interesting story here, but as it stands, it looks like the Kingpin we see in the game was at his wit's end. Perhaps losing everything, his wife maybe, his drive. He didn't even have his classic white suit on in the boss fight. That's the way I see Fisk in this game anyway. He lost most of the things that once made him the true Kingpin. It's sad to see, but hey, he had a good run. Or I could just be wrong on all of that, but it's what I like to believe. Anyways, let's move on with the next topic. So Craven in this game might be one of the most OP versions of Craven that I've ever seen in Spider-Man lore. The dude seemed like he could kill anybody that didn't have the symbiote on. I wish Spider-Man got to fight him without the symbiote, but anyways, Craven killed a decent amount of villains in this game. We see Scorpion get shit on in the main story, but there's others too that I'm sure you know of, but just to list them, he also kills Vulture, Electro, and Shocker, which is the saddest one in my opinion. In the MJ mission here, where you try to save Connors, there's areas where you can interact with their leftover tech. Craven leaves audio tapes at each discussing how he killed them, and I'm not going to show them all except for Shocker's. Take a listen.
Oh no. He didn't deserve this.
Dusk, 22 Celsius. Put to rest with him laid to the stem. This one was merely something when faced with the Predator, though. He did not try to prove himself superior. He fought only to survive. It was vicious, feral, sincere. But not enough. Even in death, his eyes stare into mine like he might try to kill me. But my luck has run out. And I am left again with no one.
Now this is very shocking. I'm sorry, I'll jump off a cliff after this video for that one. Okay, but seriously, it's crazy because in all the audio tapes, Shocker gave him the most trouble. For Vulture, he mentioned how he clipped his wings and he sounded like Vulture was no problem for him. We saw him ass clap Scorpion and he was no challenge. And Electro, surprisingly for me, was easy work for Craven. He says that Electro was a waste of his time, which is wild. I don't know, you would think Electro would be the hardest, right? Considering that Spider-Man mentioned himself in the first game that Electro could potentially go head-on with the Avengers. But that's the interesting thing. Electro could be that strong, but is most likely held back by his arrogance, perfectly showcasing the difference between having powers and understanding how to use them, which I like. It's a cool detail that I really like. Shocker, though, seemingly understood how to use his abilities here. Shocker was the one that gave him the most trouble because it seemed like Shocker wanted to live the most. It's kind of sad. Shocker really just wanted to survive like the first game where he mentions the demons would kill him if he didn't do what he was doing in that game. And in his final moments, as Craven said, he stared into Craven's eyes, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing him beg for his life. It's really interesting. I feel like people see Shocker as a joke villain because, I mean, he's kind of portrayed like that honestly a lot, but in this game, especially here, I feel like Shocker had more of a humanizing element to him, and he was just forced into this kind of life and had to do the stuff he didn't want to. It's kind of sad. Even MJ said that he didn't deserve this, and I agree. But it's the fact that Shocker put up more of a fight than Electro that just surprises me. Even Vulture and Scorpion too, to an extent, but Electro? You have to give props to Herman. I didn't want him to die. I think that was a questionable choice. But at least they kind of made up for it by giving him some respect. Props for that. And not only that, it seems Craven remembers him after the fact, praising his will to live. Rest in peace to Herman. Peter and the Avengers. Does Peter know the Avengers in the Insomniac universe? Of course he knows about them, but does he know the Avengers personally? Has he had any kind of adventures with them? Well, there is a little bit of information to imply that yes, Peter does know them on a personal level, which isn't far-fetched to say because the Avengers have been a thing for a very, very long time in this universe. Longer than even a decade plus, I would imagine. And how do I know that? Well, in that flashback mission where Peter and Harry sneak into their school in Marvel Spider-Man 2, in the dark room, you can see that there's a picture of Avengers Tower. If the Avengers already have an Avengers Tower by the time Peter just gets his powers at age 15, then they probably have been a superhero team for, I don't know, at least a year or something prior, maybe longer, who knows. But they must have been a thing for at least a little bit since they have an Avengers Tower at this point, so that's cool. Now, the next thing is something I'm sure we all know of at this point, but the very beginning of Spider-Man PS4, there's a post-it note on Peter's wall telling him to contact the initials of TS for a job offer, which is Tony Stark. I mean, come on, let's not act like it's not. I've heard people say that, oh, it could be anybody, it doesn't have to be Tony Stark, but Insomniac knew what they were doing. This is Tony Stark, don't play dumb. And it's for a job offer, and here's the thing. What kind of job is Tony offering Peter Parker? Well, it's one of two things. It all depends on if Tony knows Peter is Spider-Man, which we don't know. If he doesn't know Peter's Spider-Man, then that means that somehow average old Peter Parker somehow met Tony, impressed him, and now has a potential job offer from him. Or what I think is more likely, Tony does know Peter's Spidey, and the job offers for the Avengers, I'm guessing, right? So let's go with that, because in the game, Peter loses his job, and in the sequel, gets fired as a teacher. He never contacts Tony about this job offer as far as we know. Like, even when he needs a job, he never contacts Iron Man. Why is that? Well, this is all a grain of salt, but what I'm thinking is that the job offer is to join the Avengers, and Peter here just doesn't want to join the Avengers. It happens all the time where Spider-Man refuses to join that team because he's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and Peter doesn't want to be a part of that team. That's, I mean, it's speculation, right? Like I said, none of this is confirmed, but you guys know me, I go deep in these kind of rabbit holes. So Peter doesn't take Tony's job offer because he doesn't want to be a part of the Avengers. Okay, but Spider-Man has most likely helped the Avengers at some point and likely knows them personally because of this line he says in the DLC of Spider-Man PS4.
You know, I know a guy with a way cooler shield.
Okay, so this is obviously a reference to Captain America and his awesome shield. Peter says he knows a guy with a way cooler shield, implying that he personally has met Cap, and in the 8 years he's been Spidey, I think he has been on like at least one adventure with the Avengers. It's absurd to think he doesn't, right? Just logically speaking, like how could he not? If Iron Man and Cap know him personally, then it's not a far-fetched statement to say. I'm guessing that he helped the Avengers on at least like one mission, probably more than that. And Iron Man is pretty much like, hey, you did a good job. If you ever want to join the team, give me a call, which is what this note is implying. I hope this is true because I really like this. I think it's the perfect relationship Peter should have with the Avengers. He helps them, but he doesn't join them. Because it's just not Peter's style in most iterations, but he's friends with them, it seems anyway. Now, we can go down many different rabbit holes, like did Civil War happen in this universe? Like was he Team Iron Man at one point and then Cap later on? Who knows? Not me. But Insomniac, I think, did a great job here, if I'm correct on my theory, that Spidey has a good work relationship with these heroes and is likely willing to help them save the world if they ask, but he's still that friendly neighborhood Spidey above all else. I love this dynamic, and I hope I'm right when it comes to this in the Insomniac universe, because I like this dynamic with the Avengers and Spider-Man here. Trask Industries is mentioned in name in Marvel Spider-Man 2. Trask, for those that don't know, is a malicious organization in the Marvel Universe, shocker, heavily associated with the X-Men. They make a lot of robotic inventions and are most notable for creating the Sentinels, those giant robots that have the ability to adapt and kill any mutant they come across. Very dangerous enemies that always threaten to wipe out mutant kind from existence. In Marvel Spider-Man 2, in the mission where you find out Scorpion dies like a pussy, you can interact with a piece of paper here. It mentions here that the Craven team was investigating during the game if there was any funding from Trask Industries, but they concluded that Trask has no relation to anything in the game. Now, why do I bring this up? If you look at the other points in this note here, you can see there's a temp relocation to Madripoor. Now, as we all know, Insomniac has announced their upcoming Wolverine game whenever that game comes out. Now, I know Insomniac unfortunately got all game slates and particularly Wolverine story details leaked, but I made it a personal mission to not read or look at anything about the story. I saw some stuff accidentally scrolling through Twitter, but like nothing spoiler or story related, thankfully. So this is all my speculation. I just wanted to get that out of the way. So Madripoor in the Marvel Universe is a fictional country in Asia, which is used for a lot of Marvel stories, some being X-Men stories. It being here with Trask Industries, which is also X-Men related, has me think that this is some kind of foreshadowing potentially to the plot of Wolverine. There were rumors that I saw a long time ago that Wolverine might be set in Madripoor to an extent, so what if this is setting up for that game? Maybe Wolverine goes to Madripoor investigating Trask Industries, setting up maybe a Days of Future Past plotline or something with Sentinels, who knows? You see, putting this here and me seeing it is not a good combo because I'm going to look very deep into it. This is kind of random to just put here. They put effort to have us interact with this and see this piece of paper or information. Trask, Madripoor, 2 X-Men things, Wolverine coming out whenever it comes out, and with the Wolverine rumors of Madripoor being a thing in the game, I think that Sentinels will play a factor in that game somehow, which would be insane because Sentinels are like the end game kind of story for the X-Men, right? And since this is a Wolverine game specifically, it might not be that big of a thing. Like maybe Logan's mission in the game to investigate Trask and stop them before they make the Sentinels. It's a very interesting X-Men Easter egg, and Insomniac has a respectable amount of detail in their games, and I would not put it past them if they put this in here as some sort of foreshadowing to Wolverine. I think it would be awesome because once that game comes out, it'll be awesome to connect it back to this, but we'll just have to wait and see. For the final one, I want to talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. So S.H.I.E.L.D., the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistic Division, is the famous Vanessa Hudgens' hot security organization in the Marvel Universe that deals with superpowered threats and advanced technological issues and stuff like that. Comic book group going against comic book threats, there you go. Well, in Marvel Spider-Man 2, they're confirmed to exist. I never doubted it, but their name dropped in the sequel. In Miles' side story saying all the music stuff, at the end of that story, you can walk around the music show and look at different pieces of music history, one of which is this guy in his story. All neat, but at the very end of his story, it says that he served for S.H.I.E.L.D. Even has the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo right there in the background. So this establishes that S.H.I.E.L.D. is similar to the comics, being founded around the mid-90s, and I would assume play the same as their comic counterpart as well. Maybe the Avengers are linked to S.H.I.E.L.D. in this universe like the MCU? Who knows? But there's one thing I wanted to discuss, and that is Peter's parents and their connection to this. Listen to what Peter says about his parents in the first Spider-Man game.
People know my parents died in a plane crash. but I still can't tell anyone they were government agents. Wish I knew more about them. I wish anyone did.
Peter's parents were secret government agents, and in some iterations, his parents were S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, or at the very least CIA agents that had connections with S.H.I.E.L.D. So this leads me to believe that Peter's parents are potentially S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in this universe as well. Peter doesn't know how they died, but on an educated guess with what we know so far, they maybe died due to a mission pertaining to their job in S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, this for me is very interesting. Perhaps we'll never get an answer, or this part of Insomniac Spider-Man will never be explored, because Peter's parents were never really an important part of his character, I'd say. I mean, it's not explored a lot, and it's just kind of there, which I find odd at times, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they never explored this. But if they do, the blueprint is there. Peter's parents were killed due to a S.H.I.E.L.D. mission is what I'm thinking. In some versions, they were killed by the Red Skull, so that's a possibility, but I doubt it. Who knows? But it's interesting, and I think having S.H.I.E.L.D. here really gets me thinking of all the possibilities they can do with it. And that's the thing. All these lore details are really interesting directions they can go with the story. Maybe a prequel story of the Insomniac Spider-Man showing the Kingpin stuff. Maybe an Avengers crossover to learn more about the Avengers. Maybe the S.H.I.E.L.D. thing. There's so much that Insomniac set up that they could delve into, and I think that's really awesome on their part. And I think that no matter where they take Peter Parker's character, it could be really interesting. Or they'll probably never touch on any of these subjects, which might be the more likely case here, but hey, I like it. It's really cool to think about. But yes, those are 5 lore details in the Insomniac Spider-Man universe. Let me know which one's your favorite and if I missed anything, or if any of what I said made sense, or if it was just stupid. As always, any support on the video is really appreciated, and I'll see you on the next video. Stay safe and peace.